Welcome to Strong Legends, daily sci-fi stories that fuel your mind. Subscribe and join the legend.
Jackson Jax Marlowe leaned against the hull of his grav bike, the scarred metal warm from the twin suns hanging low in Piro 6's blood-red sky. Waves of heat shimmered across the basalt plains, turning distant volcanic spires into mirages. Out here, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest settlement, there was no chatter of colony politics, no frantic traffic of cargo transports, just silence, the kind that drilled into a man's bones and left him too aware of every breath. He sighed, running a gloved hand over the controls of his handheld seismic scanner. Its display flickered, minute tremors, nothing out of the ordinary, for a planet still settling its tectonic scars. His finger hovered over the record button, but he hesitated. After 30 years of military service, campaigns on Titan, the siege of Europa, the Delta Sector insurgencies, he'd sworn off routine patrols, yet here he was, chasing ghosts of combat in the dead quiet. "Come on, Jax," he muttered. "One, last read, then back to the outpost." Kicking up shards of black glass, he set off toward the clustering lava tubes that scarred the horizon like a jagged wound. Each step crunched under his boots, reminding him that even the most lifeless landscapes could harbor surprises and dangers. Reports of rogue seismic spikes had drawn his attention, but the deeper he went, the more the land felt alive. A low hum through the soles of his feet, the taste of sulfur in the dry air. He rounded a boulder the size of a walker mech and found the entrance, a yawning black maw fringing a half-collapsed cavern. He crouched, scanning the walls for instability. Nothing. The ceiling above shone with mineral veins that glowed faintly, rare but not unheard of. He clipped a headlamp to his helmet and clicked it on. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a sloping tunnel carpeted in obsidian shards. Jax inched forward, weapon stowed, or rather, exchanged for the medkit he'd thought he'd never need again. His pulse thumped in his ears as the scanner in his hand began to chirp insistently. 8 distinct heartbeats, each light and rapid, no more than a whisper on the sensor's display. He froze. 8 dragons. Impossible, but the readings were clear. His military training took over. Move slow, assess, don protective gear. He slid the last clip from his sidearm and snapped it back. If these were hatchlings from a saurian strain, they'd be vulnerable, but also potentially explosive. Bioluminescent scales rumored to ignite under stress. 3 careful breaths later, he stepped over a fallen rock and into the heart of the alcove. There, nestled against a thermal vent's warm exhaust, lay 8 creatures no bigger than a man's forearm. Their scales shimmered like liquid bronze, backlit by the faint orange glow of molten rock. Tiny wings, still folded, rippled with the effort to stay upright. Their heads, triangular and jewel-bright, turned toward him in unison, eyes reflecting the lamp's stark white light. Jax's breath caught. They were utterly defenseless here, bodies slick with sweat and tremors. No adult dragons in sight, no cratered shells of a nest, no footprints around the lip of the cave. Just these hatchlings clinging to life in an environment engineered to kill. One younger than the rest let out a choked chirp, a noise that stole the soldier's veneer of control. He knelt, allowing his visor to slowly close the distance. Others followed the sound, clustering around their smallest sibling. Jax's gloved hand hovered over the trembling body. Instinct told him to keep his distance, but something deeper, a memory of loss, a remnant of tenderness, pushed him forward. He retrieved a compact stim patch from his medkit and pressed it gently to the baby dragon's chest. The little creature's heartbeat fluttered faster, then steadied. The other 7 edged closer, noses brushing at the patch as if seeking the same comfort. Jax exhaled, tapping his comm. "Base, this is Marlowe. I've located 8 hatchlings badly compromised, condition critical. Requesting extraction ASAP." Static crackled, then a clipped response. "Understood. ETA 45 minutes. Don't move them until we arrive." Jax slid back from the huddle. Even with his hardened exterior, he felt the weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. These were not just creatures. They were perhaps the rarest, most dangerous survivors in the quadrant, and he was the only one between them and certain death. He gathered supplies, heat packs, rebreathers, a makeshift crate. He rigged a soft-shelled incubator from his grav bike's medical bay panels. All the while, the dragons watched, their collective gaze both wary and hopeful. For the first time since hanging up his combat rifle, Jax felt something stir in the hollow space where purpose once lived. A sharp tremor shook the cavern, rattling stones loose from the tunnel's ceiling. Jax's grip tightened on the crate's handle. He glanced once more at the fragile creatures, wings quivering, bodies pressing as close together as they could. In that suspended moment, gray ash drifting through the red light, the hiss of escaping steam, 8 tiny hearts thrumming in unison, he understood. Sometimes a man survives war only to find his truest battle is protecting what remains when the fighting stops. He hoisted the crate, glancing up as the entryway glowed with approaching grav bike headlights. Whatever came next, he knew he could not, and would not, back down. The war was over. This was his new mission. Jax returned to his outpost under a bruised purple sky, the crate of hatchlings cradled carefully against his chest. Inside the makeshift incubator, cobbled together from medbay panels, thermal gel packs, and a portable oxygen scrubber, the dragonlets huddled in a trembling mass of iridescent scales. Their faint cries, like the hiss of steam under pressure, tugged at something deep within him. He set the crate on a reinforced table and activated the environmental controls. Warmth bled into the chamber, and a gentle hum rose as the rebreather filtered stale air into fresh. One by one, the dragon's tiny forms relaxed, their limbs unfurling. Jax watched them with a soldier's vigilance and a father's awe. He scavenged what he could from his supplies: nutrient gel in syringes, nanofiber blankets, and a vial of stimulant serum designed for emergency cardiac support. To keep track of their progress, he assigned each hatchling a name and monitoring. Patch, Aaron, the snow-white scale stunner whose diaphragm fluttered with each breath. Tora, streaked with tiger-orange veins of mineral deposits. Leo, whose bronze hide carried a faint metallic sheen. Nala, the smallest but fiercest in spirit. Shira, freckled like a leopard's coat. Saber, long-snouted with curious amber eyes. Puma, sleek and quiet. Khan, broad-shouldered and silent. Night fell quickly on Pyro 6 and power outages were common. Jax rigged auxiliary battery packs to keep the incubator's heaters alive. When the first blackout hit, the hatchlings stirred, their collective heat barely sufficient to maintain core temperature. He spent hours shuttling spare packs back and forth, sweat beating at his temples. Every time he returned to the crate, the dragons looked to him as their sole source of safety. As the hours stretched into the darkness, Jax felt the sting of exhaustion. His military past offered few lessons for this type of vigil. No tactical advantage to gain, no clear objective besides preserving fragile life. Yet every flutter of a wing, every hiccup of breath, fortified his resolve. He spoke to them softly, voice echoing in the sterile chamber. "You're safe now," he murmured. "I've got you." By dawn, the power grid stabilized. The incubator's glow bathed the outpost in soft amber light. The dragons, sated and warm, dozed in a clustered heap. Jax allowed himself a brief moment of rest, leaning back in a creaking chair, the hum of equipment his lullaby. In that pause, he realized how deeply he'd fallen into their world, inventorying oxygen levels like a drill sergeant, anticipating dietary needs like a veteran medic, and offering comfort where once he doled out orders. They were no longer mere anomalies to be studied or specimens to be sold. They were dependents, bound by fragile trust. And in protecting them, Jax discovered a new purpose, a mission of compassion that demanded every ounce of his skill, patience, and heart. As he closed his eyes, the last thought echoing in his mind was not of battles past, but of the tiny, molten eyes waiting for him to rise again. Dawn broke over Pyrrhus 6 in a haze of orange ash, and Jax allowed himself a rare moment of optimism as he checked the hatchling's vitals. The dragons had grown stronger overnight, their tiny claws now clenched at the incubator's edge, wings quivering with restless energy. He cracked a rare smile, anticipating the day's routine feedings and temperature calibrations, until the alarms shattered the calm. Red warning lights stuttered across the outpost's corridors as the PA system crackled to life. Security breach. External hostiles incoming. Jax dropped the nutrient syringes and vaulted upright, his combat reflexes snapping back into place. He yanked on his armor jacket, strapped on his sidearm, and raced toward the armory. Through the reinforced viewport, he saw them. 6 badged ex-colony raiders, plasma carbines raised, advancing under the banner of a mercenary syndicate known for looting rare fauna. He didn't hesitate. Drawing on instincts sharpened in the Delta sector, Jax took cover behind a supply crate and returned fire. Bolts of blue-white energy spat across the corridor, chipping concrete and sparking against metal. Each shot forced the raiders to reposition, buying precious seconds. But he couldn't be everywhere at once. The dragons were still vulnerable in the incubator room just beyond the armory bulkhead. Thinking fast, Jax activated the outpost's old drone bay. A pair of defense drones whirred to life, their surveillance, cameras swiveling toward the intruders. The raiders cursed as automated turrets emerged, laying down suppressive fire that pinned them behind energy shields. Seizing the opportunity, Jax sprinted back to the incubator chamber and slammed the bulkhead controls shut, sealing the dragons inside a protected quarantine lock. Moments later, the raiders breached the outer door of the incubator room, forcing its shutters open with plasma cutters. Jax kicked the door frame, sending one assailant sprawling, and ducked a blaster bolt that charred the wall beside him. Exhausted but undeterred, he called out, "Get away from them!" His voice echoed through the confined space, tense and commanding. The hatchlings responded in a way no one could have predicted. One by one, shimmering embers ignited across their scales. First, Aaron's snow-white hide glowed with a pale fire, then Tora's orange veins flared, followed by a chorus of incandescent sparks. The raiders recoiled in shock as the dragons, still the size of Jax's forearm, unleashed jets of searing heat that fused shattered panels to the floor. The air crackled with primal energy, forcing the intruders to retreat in disarray. As the smoke and ash settled, Jax lowered his weapon and exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The dragons, their heat dissipating in soft puffs of steam, looked up at him with unguarded trust. In that moment, the retired Marine knew 2 truths. These creatures were his responsibility, and they were capable of defending him in return. The battle had been won, but the war for their survival was only beginning. In the days that followed the raid, Jax transformed the incubator chamber into a makeshift aviary, outfitting it with climbing ledges, low-gravity flight tunnels, and sensory panels that simulated the warmth and scent of Pyros 6's volcanic vents. Each morning began with checks of oxygen levels and thermal gradients. Each evening ended with careful feedings of nutrient gels and bioengineered meats. The dragons, no longer nameless hatchlings, thrived under his unwavering vigilance. Aaron's pale scales reflected the chamber's lights as she practiced tentative flaps. Tora's stripes pulsed when she mastered a short hover, and Leo chattered excitedly whenever Jax approached. Nala, ever the spirited runt, would slip through cracks, to explore hidden corners, returning with tiny rocks as gifts. Over time, their behaviors grew more complex. Shira curled around Jax's ankle when he knelt to inspect their enclosure, and Saber learned to mirror his hand signals, trembling his wings on cue. Word spread across the colony. The Dragon Marine was still at his post, not as a soldier, but as a guardian. Research teams arrived in rotation, instruments in hand, eager to study the creature's physiology and flame biochemistry. Jax allowed it, on one condition. He would oversee all interactions, ensuring the dragon's welfare was never sacrificed to ambition. Under his watchful eye, scientists discovered that the hatchlings' ember glands were tied to their emotional state. Stress amplified their fire output while calm fostered controlled sparks. Using this insight, Jax introduced play sessions, inflatable targets for aiming drills, scent puzzles that rewarded the dragons with warmed mineral treats, and synchronized light shows that taught them to modulate their glows. As the dragons learned, so did the colonists. Engineers retrofitted personal shields to harmonize with dragon flame signatures. Medics studied the creature's rapid tissue regeneration for advanced wound healing therapies. Children from nearby settlements were invited under strict supervision to observe flight demonstrations, their awestruck faces lit by molten hues. Through it all, Jax watched the transformation of both species. Dragons shedding their initial fear to embrace companionship, and humans rediscovering wonder where they had once seen only danger. Each ember-born light in the chamber was a testament to what empathy and cooperation could forge. One evening, after the hatchlings had drifted into a tentative slumber wrapped in their nano-blankets, Jax lingered at the flight tunnel's entrance. The low-gravity currents whispered promise, and the dragon's synchronized heartbeats, faint but steady, echoed through his comm unit. In that hush, he realized their bond had grown beyond protector and protected. It had become something profound, a shared purpose to redefine humanity's relationship with the unknown. As the colony's new dawn approached, Jax made a decision. Tomorrow he would propose a sanctuary, a habitat sprawling across untouched volcanic plains, where the dragons could stretch their wings free of walls. He would plead not as a soldier demanding orders, but as a father vouching for his children. Because in their luminous eyes he saw not beasts to be tamed, but partners in a future neither species could yet imagine. And together, they would chart a course that transcended war, greed, and fear, illuminating the darkness of space with the glow of hope. The suns dipped low beneath the jagged horizon, staining the sky a deep, molten crimson. Jax stood atop the ashen plateau's rim, 8 adolescent dragons clustered at his feet. Their scales, once mottled and fragile, now gleamed like burnished armor, each unique pattern catching the dying light. Behind him, the low hum of the outpost's gravdocs reminded him that sanctuary still lay within reach. But tonight, the choice was his alone. He ran a hand over Erin's cool, snow-white neck as she preened her wings, tiny talons flexing in eager anticipation. Khan nudged his boot with gentle persistence, and Nala's bright eyes danced with barely contained excitement. Jax inhaled the sulfur-laced air and felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Let them go wild here, among the dormant vents and hidden pockets of warmth. Chance and predators would test their strength, or transport them to Earth's protected preserves, where museums and militaries would undoubtedly try to tame or weaponize their fire. A soft rumble beneath his feet signaled the volcano's heartbeat, a reminder that Pyrrhus 6 was home to these dragons long before humans arrived. He tapped his comm unit. "Control, this is Marlowe. Preparations complete. We're ready to release in 5. His voice was steady, but his chest tightened. On Earth, he'd have protocols, legal teams, endless oversight. Here he was simply a guardian saying goodbye. At his signal, the hatchlings formed a semicircle. Jax unclipped the final restraints one by one, nano-latch panels that had kept them safe during training flights. As he stepped back, Erin stretched her wings in a slow, deliberate unfurling. Then all at once they rose. Ember sparks flickered along Tora's stripes, a luminous banner emblazoned across the dusk sky. The dragons spiraled upward, their synchronized flaps stirring ash into swirling halos. Below, Jax's breath caught as they arced against the red heavens, a living constellation blazing with promise. When the last dragon vanished over the crater's lip, Jax felt a hollow ache. Yet as the volcanic wind stilled, a new resolve crystallized in his mind. He returned to his grav bike and set course for the colony archives. Over the next weeks, he drafted his proposal: a fleet of bio-sanctuaries on uninhabited moons, protective, accords enshrining dragon rights, and a consortium of scientists, diplomats, and former soldiers. The Dragon Accord designed to govern human-dragon relations across the rim. His first submission was met with incredulity. Commanders scoffed, bureaucrats delayed, and investors balked. Then came the footage. Sweeping. Aerial surveys of dragons nesting in hidden lava caves, undisturbed by predators and flourishing in territory humans had deemed uninhabitable. Diplomatic envoys from rival colonies petitioned for environmental trusts, seeing in dragons a symbol of unity rather than conquest. Soon, Jax found himself addressing the Galactic Council via hologram, outlining the Accord's trifold promise: conservation, cohabitation, and cultural exchange. As delegates from 100 worlds listened, 8 silhouettes flickered behind him, dragons in free flight, their ember trails painting the void between stars. And so, the retired Earth Marine who had once traded his rifle for a grav bike became the catalyst for a galactic renaissance. In the silent expanse of space where fear once reigned, a new light had sparked, one born of 8 dragon hearts and a soldier's unwavering conviction that life, in all its forms, deserved the chance to soar,